for Rafa, that was the story that was important and the product would follow. And you'll never hear us say that. We're going to make the product first and the story will follow. Sometimes it's two very, very different approaches that end up in a similar place. And I think both have, a big spot in the cycling world. It's kind of funny that they tell a lot of the cycling history that we wrote, but we're so focused on like writing the next story that we don't dedicate probably the time we should to telling our own history.
From Escape Collective, this is Overnight Success, the podcast about the entrepreneurs, the personalities, and the passionate people who make up the sport of cycling and the stories behind the icons they've built. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more iconic brand in cycling than Castelli. The company dates back to the late 1800s to around the time of the first ever documented bike race. In 1876, Vittorio Gianni opened a tailor shop in Milan where he made clothes for businessmen, the Milan Ballet, and football teams such as AC Milan and Juventus. Alfredo Binda, 5-time winner of the Giro d'Italia, was one of his loyal customers.
So it was in the center of Milan, and the Milan-Torino bike race actually started in 1876 as well. So I guess cycling was in our destiny back then.
In 1935, Armando Castelli joined Gianni's staff, and in the same year, he decided to buy the company. He worked to keep the clientele, including Gianno Bartoli and Fausto Coppi. In 1948, Armando Castelli had a son who he named Maurizio, who, from an early age, was captivated by sportswear and learned the trade from his father. Apparently, the two didn't get along very well because of the clash between the father's traditionalist ways and the creativity of Maurizio. So, in 1974, Maurizio gave life to his own company, which he called Castelli, and chose the iconic scorpion as his emblem.
I've asked a bunch of people that were around at the time, and nobody can give the definitive answer, at least one that completely satisfies me. So one thing for sure is that early 70s was a big time for tennis, and in France they were playing with the little alligator logo. And Maurizio was a astute enough marketeer at the time to do something more memorable than just a stylized M or C. And why he settled on the scorpion. So a couple of theories that go out there is that the zodiac sign of the Scorpio, his father was a Scorpio, but they weren't exactly in the best of rapport at the time. And then somebody says there was a love interest at the time. So, that makes a better story. So let's go with that one.
There's much more to Castelli's checkered history, including many, many innovations. But their decline comes in 1995 when Maurizio, who was running the company, died suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 47 while riding the Capressa, the second last climb of Milan San Remo. The company hadn't been run very profitably and was bought by a group of investors to keep it going. Then comes an unassuming American by the name of Steve Smith onto the scene in 2000. Steve's email signature says Castelli Brand Manager, but I always got the feeling from speaking to him over the years that he did far, far more than that. As I dug into his story deeper, he's actually part owner of the business, he steers the ship, and is ultimately the man who turned Castelli around into what we know it today. So does the company have really good archives that you were able to, when you came in, look through and piece all this together, or was it quite a job of putting that puzzle together to be able to tell this story?
Yeah, well, so you've got the passage from really Vittorio Gianni to Castelli that lost some of the archives back then. Then you have when Maurizio passed away, some of the archives, not sure where they ended up. And then from going to the Castelli family to Colombo, he still has a lot of the archives. So been to Cinelli, and he let me go through those a little bit. But yes, and I don't know if you know Antonio, but he's such a he's definitely an artist as well. But just the whole history, and I think when we bought the company in 2004, the company was basically bankrupt. So we actually just bought the brand rather than the entire company. So yeah, right? Antonio is probably a legitimate owner of those archives, but he's also the archivist, right? And he loves the brand, and we have a good relationship there. So that's all good. So the archive at our offices is just a portion of what the company has done.
So what were you doing? Let's kind of switch over to you. And you came in at what year?
So yeah, maybe we'll go just one more step on Castelli. So Castelli in 2004 was bought by the company. It's called Manifattura Valcismon. So do you want to repeat that back? No, I'll dissect it.
Manifattura Valcismon.
That's pretty good. Manifattura in Italian means manufacturer.
You sound Italian, Steve. Although I'm guessing a lot of people listening to this, when they come on, they're going to expect a full-on Italian, and you have an American accent. So anyway, we'll get into your background in a sec. Keep on going.
Yeah. So Manifattura means manufacturer. Val Cismon, that's the valley of the Cismon River. So it's the company was started in 1946, post-war Italy. Started out as a wool yarn manufacturer. So where we are in the valley, just into the Dolomites, the sheep come through the valley even today, from their summer pastures in the mountains to the winter pastures down in the flatlands. And so the company started out shearing sheep, cleaning the wool, spinning yarns, and selling yarns. And by the early 50s, they bought the knitting machines and were selling wool sweaters, jumpers, and underwear worldwide, because Italy was really the China of the 1950s. And but it was Dr. Giordano Cremonese. He was a son of the founders. That he was a super athlete, and in 72 he got the Manifattura Valcismon into sports and founded the Sportful brand.
Okay.
So Sportful, on the Bora, Peter Sagan, Mapei. I mean, pretty rich history there as well. So yeah, Sportful was very much more of a manufacturing company back through the 70s and 80s, and then Sportful got started into cycling in 84.
Under its own brand or manufacturing for other people?
Both. So yeah, after university, I started at Nike, as you do growing up in Portland, and spent 10 years there. But I kind of got the itch for going off doing an overseas adventure. And so for me, it started off really as an adventure, and met up with the Cremonese family, with Dario, and they were looking for somebody to do sales and marketing. So next thing I know, I sold the house, sold everything I owned, gave the cat to the in-laws, and jumped on a plane to Italy.
How old would you have been then?
I was 32, so that was in 2000.
Quarter life crisis type period?
No, I even tried to take a leave of absence from Nike. So it was really just, I didn't do my the skip year during university.
Gap year, yeah.
Gap year. So I don't know, it was kind of a career gap year.
And were you doing marketing at Nike? Is that what you started off doing?
So I was in the ACG group as product line manager for sandals and cycling shoes. So yeah. So I got over, and so the first 4 years were just working on the Sportful brand, and then the Cremonese family bought the Castelli brand, and so all of a sudden we had two cycling brands in it. So
wow. And your role going into that was?
So yeah, I started running both of those brands concurrently. So I was kind of heading up both brands, and then we had separate product teams and separate sales teams and marketing teams on the two brands. And that actually headed up both brands until 2014, when it just got to be too big to handle both. And so we hired in a brand manager of Castelli, and then or of Sportful, sorry. And so up until a month ago, I was just focused on the Castelli brand, and now I'm moving into a new role in the company, overseeing all of cycling. So we just hired Luca Martinez to take over the reins of the Castelli brand. So another start of a new chapter.
Well, let's just back up to 2004 for a sec. When you got into Castelli, what was the state of the business, and what baggage did it have at that point?
Okay, we're going to dredge up some painful memories. No, I think what we found was a brand that was not selling a lot and in losing quite a bit of money. And it also accumulated a good bit of debt. So we, in the purchase, we also bought the share into the U.S. Joint venture, and so we had kind of a global mess to try to clean up. So the first thing was really about the positioning of the brand. The guy that had been running it, he was very, very much inspired by Patagonia, and his vision for Castelli was a Patagonia of cycling. And so, higher end product, but very much focused on the lifestyle, on traveling and kind of stuff. And I mean, the inside is not that bad. There's a lot of that what Simon Mottram did at Rafa, right?
Thinking, what's wrong with that? But it wasn't selling, eh?
Except that you're trying to shoehorn a good idea into a brand that has a strong identity.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're trying to take a brand that's been known for racing, for innovation, for performance, and turn it into something that people aren't expecting from it. And so, so it really struggled to really make any headway into that, because the people that were looking to buy Castelli didn't find the products they wanted, and the image of the brand put on those kind of products just didn't really fit. So first thing I did was did a survey of every stakeholder I could find. It's like, what do you expect from Castelli? And it was nearly unanimous. It's like, no, we want to be innovation, performance. We want to be a cycling brand. And so, strategically turning the business around really didn't require a whole lot of thought, because people already knew what they wanted it to be. So it was more of an execution of giving people what they wanted it to be. So, producing and quality product, delivering on time, and innovating it doesn't just come by pushing a button, but you never really had to question what you should be doing. You just had to do it.
And did you have much knowledge or an affliction with Italian culture and brands when you're making these decisions, or was this pretty new to you at the time? You're early 30s at this point, mid 30s?
Yeah. When I came to Sportful, I was the only non-Italian, the only person from outside of the valley, basically, in the company. And from day one, work was 100% in Italian. So it was, definitely jumping into the deep end.
You didn't speak Italian?
I'd done a couple of quarters at the local community college, so I could struggle through. And then in university, I was a business and French major, so I at least spent some time on a Romance language. So at least, I think that helped a little bit starting out. But one of the things I quickly kind of noted about a big difference between U.S. culture, or even deeper than a culture, and the Europeans, is that in the U.S., and we'll expand that to North America as a good Canadian, because the shared history there. But for us, if there's something that's broken, we try to steamroll over it and fix it. And the Europeans are really good, Italians especially, at because there's a lot of bureaucracy here. There's a lot of things that don't really work, but they always find a way around it. So, I'd already had a few years of trying to figure out how to be able to get things done in the culture, and then I think that with Castelli, it was the positioning of the brand. It was always something that I had a lot of. I felt close to it, just that innovation on product, because I'd started trying to race my bike at 15 years old, and I didn't really have that much talent, and didn't really like to train, but I liked to race. And so eventually made it up to category 2, and was a mediocre category 2 rider. But I always really paid a lot of attention to my equipment and looking for those equipment gains. And I think that, just that curiosity of like how we can make things better definitely helped on bringing Castelli to the innovative side. And then, the experience at Nike was invaluable, because to the outside public, we see a lot of the marketing that Nike does, but working on the inside, you just see this big machine that just does everything right, from just the method to product innovation to product development to sales to marketing to it's such a big machine that it almost feels like 95% of what they do runs almost automatically. And so they can use all those people, working on the next innovation. So, trying to just operationally, structurally get Castelli back on its feet. It was funny because we had to really overcome that image that Castelli had with the shops of being a poor supplier. So it was easier to, especially in the beginning of the turnaround, it was easier to turn around in markets where we had essentially disappeared, because the markets where we had kind of hung on, the shops had such low expectations for us that, and even in Germany, I mean, you'd call up shops and, say I'm calling from Castelli, they would hang up on you. So.
So you didn't have a brand problem at that time, did you? You did come from a strong brand heritage. You had to get that back on the direction. Was it more of an execution, delivery, expectation, reputation you needed to fix?
Yeah. I mean, so consumers, especially the ones that had been around in the 80s and early 90s, they still remembered it. And it's funny because, I mean, even today, though, you can talk to so many cyclists and they'll remember their first Castelli piece. So it's always been a brand that's had a strong consumer appeal. But fortunately, during the rough years, the retailers had kind of stopped ordering it. So the brand had kind of disappeared before consumers really realized that they didn't see it anymore. And I mean, if you spend a minute of time here, you can think of some other brands that have disappeared that you don't really realize that you don't see them anymore. And so in a way, a lot of times the shops kind of protected the consumers from our self-inflicted damage. And so, consumers generally were fairly quick to pick it back up, especially once we started doing some things that resonated. So it was already in 2007, summer of 2007 was the first collection we did with it. And we already came out with the first aerodynamic jersey there, the innovative new free bib short. We did a 70-gram Superleggera jersey that was pretty innovative at the time. So right out of the blocks, we had some innovative product. And then also 2007 was our first year back in the pro peloton.
How long was that gap between your professional presence?
Yeah, so the last year had been, it must be 2003. Did Tiscali for half a year.
So not that big of a gap.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a couple of false starts in there because they did Phonak for a year, and there was in around 2003 and 2002, if you remember, it was like Acque Sapone, the zebra suits. Up until Sanremo, there was scorpions on them, and then all of a sudden they show up at Sanremo, and it was rebranded, or everything was redone by Nalini, because there was into March they still hadn't paid the fixed amount part of the contract. So Acque Sapone went to Nalini and got the kit made. So yeah, there was a few blunders along the way that made it difficult for us to get back into the pro peloton, because also there we would call up teams, and before we could get beyond, I'm calling from Castelli, usually there was a click on the other end of the line. So,
and why did you see that as being such an important part of the rebuilding of the business and the brand?
Well, partly because it obviously is a big stage to be seen. We wanted to make a strong message that Castelli is back into performance, into racing, but then also working with the pro teams. If you do it in the right way, it's an invaluable source for product inspiration and development and improvement. So, so we felt like we needed to be back in there, and it was really a part of a longer term plan to develop. We wanted to become the best brand for pro team racewear. So we had to get a foot back in.
So 2007, Sonia Duval was the probably one of the, in my memory, one of the most recent sponsorships in that period that you guys had. Was that a big significant step for you guys at the time?
Yeah, no, it was a big step, because that was our first step back in, and we really have to thank Mauro Giannetti, he's at UAE now, but he was the guy that gave us a chance, and so we went to them, and definitely we let them know that we'd had the checkbook ready and we wanted to sponsor, but we immediately talked about the product innovation we were going to bring them. And Mauro was very, very keen on this on the product innovation. And so he was quick to take note of it. And right after the Giro, he and Gilberto Simoni came down to our offices, and we went for a ride at lunchtime after we spent the morning taking them through all of our products. And we just had a single sample of this new Aero jersey, the new Superlight jersey. So Mauro gives the Aero jersey to Simone as we go up this big long hill up the Croce d'Aune, where Campagnolo invented the quick release. So yeah, Mauro gives Simone the Aero jersey on the way up, and then they swap jerseys at the top. And Mauro put like a minute into Simone on the descent with this Aero jersey, and that really sealed the deal right there.
Really? Is that right?
Yeah. Because we were right there was no Aero jerseys back then. I mean, look at the pictures of Armstrong. He's like in his flappy T-shirt.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And all of a sudden, so here's this Aero jersey, and at 40K an hour, it saved 18 watts.
Yeah, you forget, eh? Like,
yeah. I mean, there was big low-hanging fruit back then.
And did you see it like that at that point, or was it still like, what are we going to do performance-wise? Like that hasn't already been done.
I mean, that's never really come to my mind of things have always been done. I mean, even today, there's so many things we can still do. But back then, that Aero jersey was the inspiration came. I was at Interbike in 2005. Going through the back halls, because back then Zips just had a little pop-up booth, the rent-a booths that you do at Interbike on one of those halls with all the people that you're thinking, man, these guys mortgaged the house to be here. And Zip was showing the new 404 with the dimples on it. And I stopped there and I'm looking at it, and the information about it is it says that the dimples save 4 watts. It's like, maybe we could put dimples on a jersey and save 4 watts, because that would be huge.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we start down this rabbit hole of trying to make an aerodynamic jersey. But at that time, right, nobody had ever made an aerodynamic jersey. Where do you start? Right? I did up the brief and I had to pass it off to the designer. It's like, okay, design an aerodynamic jersey. And she's like, what? So she kind of struggled for a while. She knew an engineer at Ferrari and wrote to this guy who's like, hey, I need to do an aerodynamic jersey. Where do I start? And I still have the email. The guy wrote back and reading down into a ways, basically says that basically you're wasting your time, because anything under 200 kilometers an hour, aerodynamics doesn't matter.
Yeah,
so,
really.
When you have 600 horsepower under you. So yeah, that's where we started out of, hit a brick wall there. And I had, back when I was racing in Oregon, friends through friends, I don't know if you remember the name Kirk Willett, who was pretty promising U.S. racer until he was the problem with the artery going through the leg, that when it gets shunted off. So his career was cut short from that. But his brother Craig was pretty decent racer, but also the engineer he was doing a lot of work. He had a website called Bike Tech Review, I think it was. His day job was at TaylorMade, but in San Diego, right next to the wind tunnel. So he would go, and anytime he could get time, and he'd test his own hobby, his own stuff for his website there. So reached out to Craig and roped him into the project. And he really is, from a pure theoretical level, he mapped out, I mean, he got 90% of the way there to what we know of today that works really well. And so he put in the theory, and we still didn't really have the tools to make it. So we had to develop new fabrics and new fits. And I mean, even there, because the first thing we were trying to do is get rid of all the folds, but we had to go to a more elastic fabric, and the elastic fabric, of course, it pulls all over, and we had to try to get it as aerodynamic as we could, but then we had to make it so that people would actually wear it, because the first versions were super aerodynamic. We tried to get rid of all the wrinkles on the front, but that means the zipper comes up to just blow your rib cage, right? So that's never going to work.
I remember seeing some of the photos of the Garmin Sharp guys in the time trial suits helping each other into them and stuff, and the impracticalities, but performance of those.
So we did the Aero jerseys for we had one in the collection that we could go farther with than what we could do for the pro teams, because the sponsors obviously want to have their logos front and center. So we couldn't do some of the aerodynamic stuff on the pro team jersey, but the Sonia Duval guys all had the pro team jerseys. And David Miller was there. He was the only guy that really understood it, right? The other guys was like, oh, it's too tight. Oh, it's a little bit wet I'll get sick when I go down the hill. So, so it wasn't, that was 2007 we had the aerodynamic jerseys, but not even the team really noticed. And then it wasn't really until Cervelo Test Team in 2009 when those guys showed up with full aero kits, full aero bikes, full aero wheels. And that spring, remember, they were a Pro Conti team, a second division team. And by May of that year, they were the number one ranked pro team. And they had the number one ranked rider with Heinrich Hausler of all of pro racing. And, those guys would show up at a race and they would have like a 25, 30 watt advantage over everybody else, just because everybody else was still on old bikes, old wheels, old clothing. So we had they caught up fast, but there was that spring where there really was it was a game changer in equipment.
Going back to Sonia Duval as someone working on the brand and then the team imploding because of doping, what does that do to, I guess, your mindset of sponsoring teams in this sport that just seems to happen again and again, and you're trying to do a good thing for the brand? Is that something that is detrimental to the brand at the time, or is it just kind of this storm in a teacup?
Yeah, it's complicated, right? On the one hand, as the clothing sponsor, you're far enough removed from that inside operations really to be. I think most consumers don't really blame us if a rider dopes. On the other hand, there's some teams that we all have question marks about, and we've generally avoided those. So Sonia Duval was kind of like a only way in to pro team, and there was some question marks around that team. So we kind of knew what we were playing with, and we had all kinds of assurances that it wasn't being done through the team. And even today, there's not really. Ricardo Rico has demonstrated again and again that he's perfectly capable of doing all that stuff on his own. So no, it's also deeply unfortunate, because I just think of it because one of the fun parts of my job is getting to work with a lot of these pro riders, and none of these guys ever wanted to dope. It just kind of became this system that perpetuated it. And we would also see close up kind of the tragedies of some of these kids that get spit out because of the system. So I firmly believe that the situation today is, the kids back then couldn't even have dreamed of what they have today.
So shortly after you got into Cervelo, which was quite a big step, I'd argue, for you guys in terms of notoriety, and you seem to be a lot more attached to them in terms of front and center, at least from my outside perspective. Was there something you did different to activate your sponsorship with that better?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a transition story that we should go back and touch on, please. Because it was on middle of July, the day that Ricardo Rico got busted at the tour. Happened like 11:30 in the morning. The news came across, and so obviously we weren't entirely surprised, but we were immensely disappointed. And we were sitting at lunch at the little restaurant there in Funzazo, right near the office. And literally, it must have been right around 1 o'clock that the phone rings with a Dutch number. And I answer it, and I hear, Steve, yeah, this is Gerard Froman. You probably don't know me, but I'm from Cervelo. Yeah, we met last year at the Giro. You probably don't remember me. So anyway, we go from there, and that's when he tells me about the Cervelo Test Team project.
Right. Okay.
So, the serendipity of like an hour and a half of like being at lowest of the lows. And but it's funny though, because he talked about the project and obviously immediately talked about how this team would be different. Really set up to support the industry sponsors. And because it's set up by the industry sponsors, when it's us running the show, we can't claim that detachment from any sort of doping problems. So the setting up as a clean team was one of the absolute founding principles of the team. So he immediately when he talked about this, it was just like, just salivating. It's like, yeah, we got to be there. But then I had to sell it internally because we just had this thing from Rico, and so we were all kind of negative on the pro racing, and we were talking about just taking a sabbatical year. But I was trying to push for this, like, here we should go. We should spend World Tour money on a Pro Conti team, actually more than World Tour money. So an expensive sponsorship on a second division team. And I just remember Dario saying, no, it's like, okay, if we're not going to take a sabbatical, then at least we got to go to the top team. And there's this new team called Katusha that's coming together. We should take a look at them. And so obviously, where we ended up, but yeah, those were the discussions internally. It's like, we're going to spend more on a second division team than we would spend on this new super team from Katusha, or do we just take a year out and evaluate? So yeah, so that's the transition story and into the Cervelo test team. So right from day one, the first team meeting, all the sponsors were there, and the riders are told right from day one. It was inspiring. It was like, guys, the pressure's not on to win. The pressure's, we want to support the sponsors, and we want to have a good team. We want to be able to provide the hospitality. We want to do everything right, and the results will come. But that's not the only way we can be successful. And just the group of riders that they put together, there was a lot of guys in there that were given a second chance, and built around two really solid cornerstones with Hushovd and Sastre. It's funny, even now, what are we, 12 years on? When we meet up at the races, the staff from there is like, there's still that bond.
Oh, really? Those were good years, weren't they? Was that another level of sponsorship in terms of commitment from you guys, just being more involved? Was it more kit? Was it more money?
Yeah, well, so it was a little bit more money than Sonia Duval, and there was also a full men's and women's team, so that was a step up. Plus, as a Sonia Duval with a Spanish team, anytime it would rain, the guys would just put on the rain jacket and start thinking about tomorrow. But now we have a team that's built around the classics, and so all of a sudden, rain kit becomes fundamental. So that's where we struggled a little bit starting out. Ironically, is that. That year, the Tour of California was in February, and we were down there, and that was a year it was cold and rained the entire way. And so, yeah, we had Cervelo test team riders. Some of them were like, we dug stuff out of the warehouse. Some of them went and bought Pearl Izumi jackets and just trying to survive that week. So it was really from that experience and Cervelo test team that led us to do products like the GABA.
This podcast is fully funded by our members at Escape Collective. In fact, all of our content on our website and our podcast network is 100% supported by our members who believe that cycling media should be independent from the sport and industry we cover, and that we should exist to serve you rather than live or die by our ability to be a platform for the sole purpose of selling you more stuff. If you enjoy this podcast or any of our other work and believe in our mission of independence, please go to escapecollective.com/join and become a member today. Thank you for your support. Now, this is coming up to a significant moment for Castelli, not just one of product innovation and influence, but one of notoriety, brand recognition, and skyrocketing sales through what was basically a happy accident. And tell me about the start of the GABA and how did that start coming about from the riders' feedback and needs?
Yeah, coming actually even before Tour of California, we knew that we needed to step up our rain jacket game. And so we'd been working on, we had this really cool new super light Gore-Tex fabric and done a cool jacket using plissé treatment. Like you see on motorcycle suits, how they kind of fold the fabric so it takes up some of the volume, but it's still stretchy. So we'd done that. The jacket was super cool. And so we'd organized a focus group. There was at the Brixia tour here in Italy near Lake Garda. By chance, Cervelo had like 8 of their guys from Ireland with Phil Degnan. They had the Swiss guys, a Belgian guy, and Norwegian Gabriel Rasch. So all 8 guys there were coming from rainy climates, and we'd organized this focus group and focused on cold and wet. Like, how can we improve our products for cold and wet conditions? And we spent most of an hour talking about minutia of how we can improve this rain jacket. And Gabriel Rasch, I mean, this is in August of this year, right? And as a good Norwegian, he had always been quiet. I mean, hadn't hardly exchanged words with him the entire year because he's super shy. And he holds up his hand and he says, sometimes though when you're racing in the rain, it's not that cold. And you put on a big jacket and it's too hot. Your arms are flapping around. And so you're spending a lot of energy to drive the jacket through the air. And he says, what I put on is this waterproof vest. He actually goes up to his room and he gets this absolute, this terrible piece. It was from his Credit Agricole days. He had dark green and he blacked out the logo. And it was like this heavyweight plastified fabric of, no breathability whatsoever. It was cut like a balloon, but it was just a waterproof vest. And he's like, this is what I put on because it keeps my core warm. And, you're going to get wet from the outside. You're going to get wet from the inside. You're going to be wet, but you're going to keep your core warm and you can still race. And so from that, we go, yeah, but it's like, it's not very aerodynamic. Wouldn't it be better if it was fitting close? And he's like, well, yeah. And then it was like, don't you get water coming in through the sleeves? Wouldn't it be better if it was short sleeve? Like, well, yeah. And then we asked him, it doesn't breathe any though. He's like, well, and in fact, to each of these questions, his answer was like, yeah, but it's better than a jacket. So anyway, we come out of this with like this kernel of an idea of we got to give these guys something to really race in when it's not survival conditions. So we come back and after 2 or 3 weeks, a designer, developer, they've kind of gotten nowhere on this project. So they put down, it's like, look, let's just take their training jersey. Let's do it in this new Gore fabric, the stretchy Gore fabric we've been working on. So I'll give it the fit and the aerodynamics. Let's make the sleeves longer, make a top collar higher, and let's give it a tail to protect from the wheel spray. But because I'd hoped that these guys would come up with something spectacular of like something new and innovative.
But you were looking for a rain jacket, not a jersey. That was the initial.
Yeah, a rain jacket. So, but since the designer and developer hadn't really come up with anything spectacular at this point, the clock is ticking on the next season, so we got to get something out there. And so in my mind, it's like short sleeve rain jacket. We're never going to sell any of those. So the last line on the brief is where I kind of spelled out how to do it is like, hey, we're never going to sell any of these. So, but the pros need it, so let's just not waste too much time on it. So
really,
yeah. And so anyway, went through the development and. I finally get these jackets, and Soren and myself, we go up to the opening weekend in Belgium. This is Thursday before Het Nieuwsblad, Het Volk back then, and Korn, and we pass out these jackets to the riders. It was weird because they put them on and then they kind of touch themselves. They look down. It's like, oh, this is so cool. And I'd never seen reactions like this from pro riders, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. And anyway, Saturday at Het Volk, little bit of rain, but they don't really use the jacket. Then Sunday, this Atlantic hurricane moves in, and it was like 3 degrees and 80-kilometer-an-hour winds. And so these guys are like racing like from the beginning to the end. And out of 170 starters, only 26 guys finished, and we had 5 Cervelo test team guys in there. And just right up to the finale, there was Hushovd off the front. We thought he was going to win, but it was like from that day. So that was on Sunday. And then Friday, the next Friday, we're down at Strade Bianche, and Juan Antonio Vander Fletcher, sees me at the hotel. He's like, hey, aren't you the Castelli guy? Where can I get one of those black jackets? So immediately it was a game changer. The other riders realized it's like, I got to get that jacket to be competitive.
And didn't Jez Hunt win? Was it Kern with that on? Didn't he get?
No, he didn't win. He was right in there. Dominique Roland was in there. Who was it? Yeah.
Geez, there's a name I haven't. Good old Canadian name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, I should go brush up on that part of my history. But yeah, it was amazing to see.
But it really was the game changer, I felt, in Milan San Remo 2012. Did it feel like that for you? Or sorry, 13.
2010, the riders had it at the opening weekend. So 11 and 12, it was still this underground thing in the pro riders, right? So, my premonition or my crystal ball saying we're never going to sell any of these things. The first season out, we sold 168 of those in the entire world.
Selling them outside of pro teams.
Well, selling them to retail. But then you would see them showing up in the pro races. And we weren't selling directly to any pro teams. It was like we wanted to keep this as a competitive advantage to Cervelo Test team. And so I think, man, half of those pieces we sold to retail had to show up, had to be bought by pros. And then we get news of Thomas Vuckler going into a shop and ordering 30 pieces that he personally paid for his entire team. And so it's funny. I did a graph on this one time of the retail sales. It was like just inching up until Sanremo, the day that everything changed.
Explain to me what changed from your perspective, because it was a crazy winter day, and I think everyone remembers the worst weather of that, and a lot of people were wearing that GABA jacket, weren't they? That weren't supposed to be.
But if you're really watching the races that spring, I mean, every single race, the entire spring had rained. So for those of us, the more casual observer, it was that day. It was the first day we saw it, because not many of us sat around to watch Tirreno Adriatico and Tour de Med and all that stuff. So, but no, what that jacket did is that jacket is just a couple watts slower than an aerodynamic jersey, whereas if you put on a rain jacket, at 50K an hour, you've got to push an extra 50 watts. So it's really a gear or two lower you have to go to push a jacket, an old style rain jacket through the wind. And so, that's what changed, is that, if you're wearing something aero like that, you can race, you've got a couple kilometers an hour advantage. And so you can't really race with an old style rain jacket anymore. It really, it was definitely a game changer. Unfortunately, it had an unintended consequence of, Sanremo in the snow. Those are not conditions for a GABA. You need a rain jacket. But as soon as one dude pulls it on, right? If you wanna play, then you've gotta go there too.
Well, and the Cancellara was wearing one, who came in second that year, didn't he? And then Kliok, was he sponsored by
Cholek? He pulled his off at that last little town before he hit the Poggio and threw it by the side of the road. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What a sort of testimonial that you guys didn't really have to do. And what happened to sales of the 100 whatever you sold that previous year? What happened to sales then?
Yeah, no, they pretty much exploded.
How could you manufacture to predict that?
Well, we hadn't manufactured to predict it, and then the fabric takes a long time to get. So it took us a couple of seasons to fully catch up, and and now it's slowed down a little bit because a lot of people have the jacket. But it's funny because when we do the fittings on pro team riders or pro riders that are coming into one of our teams, and you tell them about the products they're going to have when you get to the GABA, the common response is, "Oh yeah, I know all about the GABA. I've got a couple of them at home." So,
and with that material, how did you come across the material? It was very different, almost like it wasn't neoprene, I know, but it felt almost neoprene-ish.
The Gore membrane has more useful breathability for cycling activities than anything else we've found. So it starts to it has good breathability at moderate intensity. She'll stay drier. At high intensity, nothing can keep up with the amount of sweat we put out. But we've kind of felt like it had the best breathability plus the water protection we needed. But we'd been after Gore for a long time because the membrane is actually PTFE, which we know as Teflon, which that's the stuff you use to wrap your pipes when you try to be a home plumber, right? And that stuff has no stretch or return to it. So just physically, it doesn't have any return. But we've been after them. It's like, we need to have a stretchier fabric to make these garments fit. And so they came up with a new manufacturing technique where they could make a finished fabric that's stretchy using a membrane that's non-stretchy. And so we've been trying to get this fabric for a while, and just by chance, it's like the fabric was coming available at the same time that Gabriel Raj came up with the idea for finding a use for really a specific use for the fabric.
And Gabriel Rash is the GABA.
Yeah, so that's his nickname. So no, the originally we I named the jacket the Rain Race Jacket, I think I'd called it. So pretty catchy. Pretty proud of myself for that. So we delivered. So there at the end of February, we delivered the pieces just for the guys at the Belgian opening weekend. And then we were still manufacturing, and we delivered the pieces for the rest of the team at San Remo. Was that 3 weeks later, I guess? Yeah. I go walking into the team hotel carrying the box of these Rain Race jackets, and everybody in the team go, "Oh, is that the GABA?" So it was the team riders that named the jacket after him.
Oh, really? Okay. In 2004, Rafa was born, but it wasn't until around 2012 when they really started people started taking them real seriously. And I think they really started gaining momentum around the world. And from my perspective, they were one of the first in the industry who were doing things really, really differently. It was a direct-to-consumer approach. They took their sponsorships differently. They told stories versus going for a technical differentiator. What did that mean? I guess, how did you view that at the time? Was that considered something that was threatening, or did that help your business? Or what was it like for you then when they became a real competitor?
Yeah. You've probably picked up through the website so far that we're very much a product first company, trying to make not even product as in make products to sell, but products that solve a problem, that make cycling better. And we want to make it so that your ride is more fun, more comfortable, faster. And so we've remained quite focused on that. We don't spend a whole lot of time really looking closely at what the competition does. It's a little bit like if you're in the group and you're following behind somebody, you know this. If you're looking at his back wheel, you know you're gonna crash, right? You don't have time to react if you're looking at the back wheel of the guy in front of you. So we want to be out in front. We want to keep our eye down the road on our consumer, on what they need. As Simon said on this podcast, that for Rafa, that was the story that was important, and the product would follow. And you'll never hear us say that. We're going to make the product first, and the story will follow. So I think sometimes it's two very, very different approaches that end up in a similar place, and I think both have a big spot in this cycling world. It's kind of funny that they tell a lot of the cycling history that we wrote, but we're so focused on like writing the next story that we don't dedicate probably the time we should to telling our own history. So, but but in the end though, it's kind of cool because all of us, Simon, you, me, there's so many people in this industry. We have the same absolute passion for this sport, and we express it in different ways. Just because you like one musical artist doesn't mean you don't like somebody else. You could, I suppose there's somebody out there that likes Justin Bieber and James Taylor.
Who would you have considered your competitors? Or, I guess you have to be aware of that at some level. Who would have you seen, and what did you who gave you fire under your butt to innovate and so forth?
Yeah. Well, it's the thing that's really strange about this cycling market is that it's incredibly fractured country by country. If we go to Germany, we list the competitors, but then we go to Spain, there's probably 2 or 3 guys or common on both lists. And then we go to the US and there's different ones. We go to Canada. Louis Garneau is a competitor in Canada, but doesn't really show up anywhere else. And so, on a global basis, kind of that top level is really the Assos, Rafa, Castelli group generally considered. But it varies a lot from market to market.
What about in Italy? There's a lot of Italian brands. Is that something that is
a ton of small brands? If you look bigger picture at the market over the last 5 years, 6, 7 years, if you put together all of these small emergent brands that started out on Instagram and then some of them have grown beyond that, if you put all those together, that's the biggest part of the market that's grown. But what's interesting is that those guys do relatively well in shorts and jerseys, which is a little bit more of a kind of a t-shirt type of wear. We actually do as much business in our winter gear as we do in our summer gear, just because we focus on that so hard. For me, growing up in Oregon and having to ride in all sorts of conditions, and then where our office is, we're First Valley into the Dolomites, so we have a hot summer, really cold winter, and we get as much rain as London. So it's like the perfect place to have an apparel company, because really outside our door, we can test everything if you just wait a few days until the weather turns.
Yeah. On the note of the micro, Instagram brands, one doesn't really make a difference, but when you start to get dozens of them eating into the wallet share of people, did you see that start to make a difference?
It's hard to tell because we've grown every year since 2005 when we brought it in house. And we've managed to be successful through it. I'm not sure how much of that has, on the one side, for sure, somebody that may have bought a Castelli piece has ended up buying let's just give you let's use a Melbourne reference, a map jersey, right? But all these little guys have also brought freshness to the market. They've also brought attention. So the consumer, right? Consumer used to buy the cheapest Pro Team replica kit that he could find to go ride in. And now every group ride you go is a fashion show. So, for sure we benefited from that. So, but in the end, we're doing fine. We're having a good business, and we're happy if more people are riding their bikes.
So COVID, it hasn't just been an online boom for you, but it's also been a demand boom.
Yeah. The van boom, and then there's been slowdowns throughout the supply chain. From right now, nylon yarns are really hard to get. Lycra yarns are really hard to get. Then given factories, maybe at that factory a few workers test positive and they close down the factory for 2 weeks. So it hasn't been a blanket everything like the faucet turned off, but it's definitely reduced pressure, let's say, in the plumbing.
Yeah, okay. At the end of 2016, Rafa ended their sponsorship with Sky and Castelli stepped in. What opportunity did you see with that partnership?
Yeah, no, when I mentioned before back in 2007 how we had set this goal to we wanted to get to the summit of pro team wear. We definitely saw stepping into Sky is there. So we wanted to go to Sky to help to further improve the technical level of our products. Very much, 80% of the products we supply to Team Sky Ineos now are also available to normal consumers, the exact same identical garment. And so we wanted to take that step up. We also wanted to do on the whole research side to get to another level in terms of technical level of all of our products, but especially in the aerodynamics. And then obviously to the image of Sky as that technical research team, we wanted to align with that. And so over the last 5 years, I think we've achieved a lot of those goals.
What are some of the things, the innovations, the feedback that you've got that's allowed you to be better? What's resulted from them?
Yeah, so on the technical, the formalized research side, they had, just before we started with them, they'd done a project to research. They wanted to find the most expert people in the world on textile aerodynamics. So They went about it by looking through published research and ended up with meeting with these guys at the Norwegian Technical University in Trondheim. So Luca Ojano, he's actually Italian from the island of Sardinia. He's up there. He's a big surfer, so goes and surfs in the North Sea, but he's also become like the leading expert in the world on textile aerodynamics. And it's a technical university primarily focused on energy. So obviously Norway mostly means petroleum, but they graduate about 30 PhDs in aerodynamics each year because they explained to me what they do for studying wind farms. And I had no idea of this. The wind farms, that turbine, the tips of the turbine will be spinning at up to 400 kilometers per hour. And the wake off of one turbine can affect another turbine a kilometer downwind.
Right?
Yeah, there's way more research that goes in. To us, it looks like they just plop those things on any mound. But no. So the amount of CFD time going into wind turbines is insane. But it's exactly the same physical laws that apply to a cyclist going through the air as what it does for a wind turbine. So we have access to these students that do a lot of because it's dirty grunt work to do all the aerodynamic research because again, here there's no book that tells you how to do it. So you have to start with good theorists of to know which rocks to turn over, and then you got to start turning over all the rocks to find those gains. And it's a lot of time in the wind tunnel with fabrics on cylinders and different speeds and different yaws, and then you have to start to figure out CFD. You have to scan in a rider to a CFD and figure out where to put which fabrics on the body. Then you have to make up the samples. In some cases, you have to come up with new manufacturing methods to be able to make what the theorists come up with. Then you got to from your CFD or from your 3D scans, you got to make a mannequin of Bernal or Froome or Kwiatkowski, and then you put the stuff on the mannequin and blow the wind on him. And if it still comes out good, then you throw it onto a real rider, and then eventually you get it onto the road.
Jeez.
So, yeah.
So this type of stuff you did with Team Sky?
Yeah. So, we started back in 2006 there, making the first aero jersey was our first aerodynamic foray. And then we did quite a bit through Cervelo testing. Then we kept it up through Garmin Cannondale with Robbie Ketchel, who another one of the genius aerodynamicists. And we'd kind of run into a brick wall with Garmin with the theories that we were working on. And what Luca kind of helped us through was figuring out why we weren't getting improvements. So taking the next step on theoretical level. And then the coolest thing there was at the 18 tour with a start there in Dusseldorf, where we made this new suit using Luca's theories, and we'd done literally 1,000 tests of finding the right way to manufacture it. And so we figured out how to make this suit and plopped 4 out of the. We had 4 riders in the top 10 on that time the opening time trial, and then the UCI promptly declared the suit illegal, but let the results stand. So, and then the next day, on the cover of the Keep French newspaper was it excès de vitesse? So breaking the speed limit. So a big, huge front cover. So that's the kind of things we work for.
Is that like, high fives, we did a great thing for our brand, or is that like, damn, we got our skin suit banned? How do you see it in that moment?
Well, yeah. So in that particular case, if we had made, because a lot of what we do, right, we do it on the pros. It's cool to win the Tour de France. It's cool to win the big races. But our real measure of success is when we're able to do something that's good for them that then everybody is able to benefit from, right? And so if that had been a product that had been good for everybody, then there might have been some mixed feelings about it. But you've got to be able to ride over 50K an hour to take advantage of that suit. So it really was. It wasn't even for all the pros. It was for an elite group of pros. So yeah, getting a product that it was technically illegal. It's technically illegal by the UCI's rules at the time. So, when we make a product that is so good that they have to change the rules on, then yeah, that's a high five moment.
How do you even view the economics of developing that and it getting banned so quickly? Is that you chalk it up to we got a lot of exposure, or does it just not add up and you kind of got to be quite passionate about this to be crazy enough to do it?
Yeah, I mean, what they made illegal about that suit was a fairly narrow interpretation. What we'd done is we'd kind of done, instead of golf ball dimples, we'd made raised pimples, we called them. And the manufacturing technique to do that, because it was a molded raised portion of the suit, that's what the UCI said we couldn't do anymore. But the learnings we had off of the suit have directly then influenced what we have now that's even better than that piece was. So, I mean, yeah, I guess I'd never really thought of it like the way you'd phrase it. It's like we threw away. It's like we learned a lot. We learned something that works, and we just had to find a new manufacturing method to do something that's even better.
Yeah. And what's that used on right now?
So on the suit that Filippo Ganna has. So it didn't work so well for him. Yeah, when we're recording this the day after the Olympic time trial, so that wasn't the day's best suit, but we didn't really make that suit for a course with 860 meters of climbing.
With much of the cycling world now arguably moving away from performance into, hey, I'm going to ride my gravel bike. And of course, everyone wants to be comfortable, but it seems to be, weight and aerodynamics don't seem to be a priority to this, I wouldn't say new wave of cyclists, but this new style of cycling. And it sounds like you've gotten into it. I've certainly gotten into it. How do you remain relevant to that market with your mission of, faster?
The most innovative clothing for the cyclist seeking maximum performance.
Okay, so that's something that can fit easily into this new style of cycling.
I mean, Cape Epic, yeah.
Yeah.
The gravel grinder, yeah. But even like a week-long bikepacking trip, people, I was just reading on bikepacker.com yesterday about, there's an article about one guy who he'd gone from padded shorts into wool briefs and riding non-padded shorts, and just his explanation of how he got there and his experimentation, and then the 200 comments afterwards. I mean, these are riders seeking maximum performance.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And for sure, aerodynamics becomes a less important component of that. But if you look at road cycling jerseys now, what we're generally wearing all the time, look at how much tighter it is close to body compared to what it was before aero jerseys came to the pro peloton. So in some way, we've had this impact that's touched on everybody on basically every ride, where it's become just the way you do it as a jersey that's way more aero than we had back then. And going back to this idea that fast is fun, it doesn't mean necessarily ultimate speed, but doing my 710K ride, I could have gone, maybe had my handlebars up a little higher, a little bit wider, and I could have come in, but it would have been 2 hours more on the bike. On Sunday at 8:00, when I came into the finish line, I was ready to be done.
Is that how you think of things? Is that like the 2 hours more, a day more, or whatever of,
Yeah. So, but I mean, look at how many things on our bike for so many of us. I mean, for sure, there's the person that loads up with 40 kilos of gear on their panniers and takes 6 months off their job and rides across whatever. And for that person, speed isn't quite the same thing. But how many of us are riding carbon wheels every day? Probably a lot of. Most people listening to this podcast are probably raising their hand to that. So, but we're doing it because the drawbacks to the carbon wheels, the only drawback to it is that it costs more investment up front, right? But the durability is good, the maintenance is good. There's not really that much drawbacks. So when we can bring speed and performance without any drawbacks, but performance is also keeping you dry, keeping you warm, keeping you comfortable over a wider a set of conditions. comfort is a big part of it. So obviously, the longer the duration of the event, the more the comfort fits in. The brief on our latest, we call it the unlimited line, but it's our take on gravel. We don't call it gravel because gravel is not a sport; it's a surface. So it's stuff that's made to really be multi-surface, can go anywhere. But the brief on it is like, let's bring every single bit of our technical content that we do on our pro race kit, except the aerodynamics. So let's just aerodynamics is not even a consideration. We don't need to worry about that, but let's make it like it is good at every other bit, from storage to comfort to moisture management, to the wide temperature range. But taking off the aerodynamics component, because the thing about gravel is somehow you're maybe still in your mind you're wanting to have a high level of performance, but you don't want to look like you're trying.
Yeah.
So that's we're trying to do that, is like give everything you need, but make it look like you're not trying so hard.
Yeah. If there's more than one person involved, that's very true.
Yeah.
What are you most proud of your time? Past is it 20 years? Is it 2000?
21 years now.
21 years. What are you most proud of being able to do in the company?
Really, probably the most pride is in the contribution to the company, because back in 2005 there was 36 of us, and now there's 250 of us, plus all the distributors, all the manufacturers, all of our suppliers. I mean, so it's turned it into a pretty big business, and the contributions we're getting from so many people that have become the outright experts in their field is super satisfying. Especially Sonia, our lead product developer. She started her career when she was 16 years old. She was in the factory making wool shorts. She was doing buttonholes for the pockets, because your wool shorts back then had pockets. So this is 1984 then. Then she moved up to making chamois. That was on Castelli shorts, and she was stitching in chamois on Castelli shorts. And so for the last 18 years, she's been a lead developer on Castelli. And I would argue that there's nobody in the industry that can touch her ability to make technical cycling apparel. So
that's great. Are you a lifer, Steve? Are you there with Castelli for your foreseeable future, or?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I say that I'm locked in because there's a partner in the company, but even if it was a choice, I would still stay, I think.
I'm Wade Wallace, and thanks for listening to another episode of Overnight Success. If you have suggestions on a remarkable entrepreneurial story within the cycling industry, hit me up on our members Discord channel, where I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay inspired and stay tuned for our next episode.